was recently rereading Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. If you haven't read the book, I recommend it. It's fantastic. Even if that isn't your thing, there's so many gems in it for life, for homesteading. Really fantastic. So many lessons in there, and I want to share just a couple with you today that I've been thinking about a lot lately. In fact, it's not so much that I've been thinking about it. I actually use these lessons a lot in almost all areas of life. Okay, so I'm going to cover basically two things that he taught. Now, he didn't invent these, but he utilizes these and talks about these laws. Okay, so the two laws are Pareto's law, or Pareto's principle, also called 80-20 analysis, and then there's also Parkinson's law. Okay, which again is not necessarily a law. It's just something that's been observed, and it's fairly consistent. Okay, so if we recognize that and understand these laws, we can utilize them to our advantage. And then what's very powerful is that when you utilize both of them together. And I want to talk about this within the context of a homestead and how to determine what work to do on a homestead. Okay, what work should I do? I have so much to do. What should I do? All right, so these two laws can help you and me determine what to do. So the first one, 80-20 analysis. Okay, again, Pareto's law, Pareto's principle, 80-20 analysis. And that basically says this, that 20% of the inputs of a thing produce 80% of the outputs of a thing. Okay, you can also say it in 20% of the causes result in 80% of the effects, right? So here's a couple of examples. 20%, you go to an organization, 20% of the employees are doing 80% of the work, right? Or 20% of the bugs in software produce 80% of the problems, okay, that users or customers face. Okay, and so what this results in is that people understand this principle and they go, man, it's true. 20% of whatever is producing 80% of the results. So, right, you may grow food, and you either sell it or you eat it, but maybe 20% of your crops produce 80% of the revenue or 80% of the caloric intake, right? So you can grow all kinds of things, but certain things produce more than others. Okay, and so we can utilize this by doing that analysis, and it doesn't matter what it is, right? And so we can look at our homestead and we go, okay, I have 100 things to do. I have, fences to mend, and I have things to plant, and I have, animals to take care of, and on and on and on. Well, you can ask yourself, okay, 80-20 analysis. What 20% of things is going to get me 80% of the results, right? Some of those things are more important than others. Some of those things are not emergencies. They're not urgent. Some of those things can wait. They might be perceived as emergent, but they're probably not. So, right? So you pick the 20% of things, right? You're constantly asking yourself, what 20% of things can produce 80% of the results? What few things can I do that will produce the most results? Right? So for me, for example, I've got tons of things to do, right? I have tons to do always. But what I said to myself is this today is, what couple of things can I do today that will produce the most results today? Okay, just today. I'm not going to sit there and worry about everything that's going on or all the things that I have to do. It's just the 20% of things that will produce the 80% of the results that I'm looking for, right? So I picked the 20% of the things. Well, I had a certain amount of trees and shrubs that needed to be planted, so it's like I will complete the planting of the trees and shrubs that are in the back of my truck, right? And there were some in pots, because I did some consulting with a friend, and we did a trade. So I did some consulting for him, and he gave me some excess trees and shrubs and mycelium, right? Some mushrooms. So it was great. but I needed to get that done, right? So I said, okay, that's what I'm going to do today. Okay. The other thing is like I wanted to get a physical workout in, right? These are some stuff I struggle with. So I said, I'm doing 2 things today, right? I may do a couple other things, but those 2 things I will do, right? And if I do nothing else, I'm fine with that. Okay, those 2 things. It so happens that I'm doing a couple of other things as well, like making this video, but those 2 things were it, right? That was it. And so I focused on those 2 things, and that's what I did first, right? I actually planted the trees and the shrubs, right? I did some of those yesterday, but I finished it today. Okay, now, so that's the 80-20 analysis, right? I do the analysis and I pick what 2 or 3 things that can I do today that will basically make the other things not irrelevant, but of no worry. It's like, wow, I accomplished a lot today. I'm not worried about the fact that I need to take a look at some of the weed pressure and things that I have going on in certain places, or plant out some things that are out in the grow room, etc. And I'm not worried about it because you know what? I accomplished a lot today, and I'm happy with that, right? And so focusing on the Pareto principle or the 80-20 analysis was really, really effective. Okay. The other piece now, number 2, is Parkinson's law, and Parkinson's law was observed, I think, by Parkinson, I'm assuming, just like Pareto was by Pareto in the 50s, if I remember correctly. And he said basically that the amount of time allotted for work, for a given task, that it will take that long. Okay, in other words, everything, it kind of expands to that time. So in other words, if you're sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours a day and you're expected to get X amount of work done, it's going to take you 8 hours to do X amount of work, right? Right. But if someone had said to you, hey, you can work from home, you have to do X amount of work, that same amount of work, but if you do it in 2 or 3 hours, I don't care. You're going to get paid for 8 hours. Guess what? Most people are probably going to be able to do that 8 hours worth of work in 2 to 3 hours. Okay, that's the kind of the reverse of Parkinson's law, right? That has also been attributed to things like, how bureaucracies grow and we need more people, and right. And so an allotted, like you have a given task, the resources that are for that task, the amount of resources that you have will all be used for that task. Okay. Or, right, the reverse of that is like, if you only have this amount of resources, somehow people make do with a smaller amount of resources to be able to do a similar task. All right, so you have Pareto's principle and Parkinson's law used together, are very powerful. So for example, like I planted a bunch of trees and shrubs today, and I got my workout in today, and you know what? I got it all done in a pretty short period of time, in like 4 hours, right? And I actually gave myself all day, and I could have given myself a shorter amount of time. But the fact of the matter is that if I didn't do that analysis, and if I didn't say I will do these things today, like within today, then I likely wouldn't have accomplished all what I did. Okay, I might have, got distracted and started doing something else, and been here, been there, and gotten things done, but never really accomplished anything. And at the end of the day, it's just like I might be like, oh, so much to do. Instead, I'm like, no, I was focused. I had 2 things, and in fact, I did more than 2 things, but those are the 2 key things that needed to get done today, and they did. They got done because of this melding of the 80-20 analysis in the Parkinson's law. Okay, so that's one takeaway that I took from Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek. So I recommend the book. The book is excellent, and I'll put a link to it. And let me know if you've read the book, and what was your number 1 takeaway from the 4-Hour Workweek. I'd love to hear that. That's kind of cool to hear. All right, that's it for today. I wanted to give you that lesson learned that I got from that book.